Hello and welcome back to another episode of Cyber Voices, the official podcast of the Australian Information Security Association, otherwise known as ASA. I'm your host, as always, David Willett, and it is my pleasure to have you with us as we explore the diverse voices of the Australian cyber industry. Welcome back to Cyber Voices. It's David Willett here at Sydney Sec in beautiful New South Wales for Sydney Sec 2025. I am joined today by one of our special speakers at the event. It is Gaurav Vikash, who is the Head of Security and Risk for Asia Pacific at Axon. Now, Gaurav leads the strategic security initiatives across Asia Pacific, focusing on risk management, identity systems, and emerging technologies. He's known, he may not know this, but apparently he's known for his pragmatic approach to balancing innovation with regulatory compliance. Gaurav, welcome to Cyber Voices.
Thank you so much, David. Glad to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. How have you found Sydney Sec today?
It's fantastic. And this is my first Sydney Sec where I'm presenting, but my fourth or fifth ASA events where I've been an attendee or have presented. And I love Sydney Sec because it gives me a background where I can bump into somebody and have a very detailed conversation about a problem that I'm trying to solve as well. And it's very less pretentious, where people come with their vulnerabilities and talk about topics that really, really matter. I love coming to Sydney Sec and have real conversation with real people.
Yeah, it's one of the fabulous things about ASA events in general, I think, is that community element, whether it be CyberCon or and I guess for our listeners out there who sometimes people don't know, well, why Sydney Sec? What's that? And so everyone probably knows ASA for CyberCon, but some people may not know that we actually do these one-day events in pretty much every capital city, apart from Melbourne, because you get CyberCon, which is a kind of a one-day, what would you call it, a mini CyberCon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that opportunity where you don't have to take 3 days off. And not that I mind taking the time off. It gives you broader exposure and more time to connect with people. But the one-day event is a fantastic opportunity to come and meet with the community that's local. I bump into a lot of people that I work with, people that I work virtually with, David, and a lot of other people, David Gieber, your namesake. Yeah, a lot of people, lovely people that I've known for ages, and you come and talk to and you listen about their journey, what they're doing in their organizations, how their kids are growing. So that knowing people, not just at professional level, that personal level, Sydney Sec events like those, one-day events like these, provide us that great opportunity to connect with people at both personal and professional levels.
So tell me a little bit more about your role and about Axon and what it is you do.
Yeah, so Axon is an evidence management hardware and software manufacturer. We build body cameras, tasers, license plate recognition, in-car cameras, drone cameras, all sorts of cameras, primarily for evidence collection and management to help law enforcement agencies, defense forces tell their side of the story transparently in a manner that's acceptable in a code of law. And we also build a software that goes behind those evidence collection software. I'm the head of security and risk for the APAC region. My role is primarily to look beyond the horizon from regulation compliance perspective, because given the data we collect, everything is legally privileged. We are massively regulated. We are not in a regulated industry, but our customers are. So we end up inheriting all those regulatory obligations, whether it's IRAP, the national data breach obligations, all those sorts of obligations and regulations we have to comply with. And my job is to be looked beyond the horizon, what's coming from privacy perspective, from security perspective in Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Thailand, Singapore, where we are in those countries where we're trying to grow, Australia and New Zealand, we are trying to protect. What's coming? How do we plant those seeds today so that when we are trying to help the New South Wales Police Commissioner in a year from now, he trusts us. Trust is a big thing for us. So we want to build products that our communities, not just New South Wales Police, but the communities which are on the other side of those evidence collection, they also trust those products.
Now that's not a small job.
I love that role. It gives me wings.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I imagine what you must be exposed to, not the legally privileged stuff. We'll leave that to one side. But I mean, you must be exposed to some pretty interesting trends in technology, especially dealing with the sort of stuff that you're dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. For example, our cameras, the latest version of our cameras don't just record. So when, for example, New South Wales police is a customer. So you'd see them walking around with a pretty lightweight body camera. The biggest selling feature, we thought we were building a product that would help them reduce of course, the evidence collection and all of that is kind of the bare minimum that the customers expect from that product. The other angle we were taking is by giving them cameras that can not just record, but can auto transcribe with support of AI. Say a police officer interacting with a community member, the camera not just records, it transcribes everything. And then the police officer can go and edit that draft to fill in any gaps, correct any mistakes that AI may have made before submitting it on their behalf. We thought saving their admin time was the biggest selling point. New South Wales Police Commissioner tells us, forget about that. The biggest selling point is now that police officer can have 15 minutes of lunch break that they were not able to take without this technology. Police officers spend more than 50% of their time just sitting on their desk writing reports. Our cameras are helping them reduce that time, go have a lunch break, and it helps community at the end of the day. If a police officer is relaxed, they had their break, they're going to come across as more relaxed than otherwise. And the unique selling points, other selling points of these cameras are not just the auto transcription. They can help you communicate in multiple languages. If I'm a person who, English is not my native language, if I didn't speak English at all, I could interact with a law enforcement officer in my language. The camera would, in real time, translate that into the police officer's earpiece, what I'm saying in English. And then the camera would speak back to me in my language.
That's incredible. So you've just got me really excited about that. So I am a massive science fiction fan and I love the Star Trek series. Now, in Star Trek, they have the universal translator, which is, it's always a bit confusing whether it's part of the little comm badge they wear or it's an implant in their ear.
Yeah.
But everyone in the 24th century on Star Trek can just understand each other because of these universal translators. You've invented the universal translator.
We built that, and it's only 21st century.
That you've just piqued my interest and excitement. Anyone who knows me outside of the podcast knows how much I love Star Trek.
Oh.
So the universal translator is here, everyone. That's really cool. That's incredible. But I imagine in your role, like just the way you have to manage the risk around this technology, though, in terms of, there must be incredible like privacy implications. There must also be a lot that you need to consider in terms of compliance and everything like that, just to be able to get stuff like this to work. How do you, in a role like that, how do you approach challenges like that, and how do you sort of find the right balance?
What helps us find the right balance is Axon's main goal is to reduce gun-related deaths by 50% by 2030. That's more of an American goal because thankfully we don't use guns as much in Australia. But we have a very, very similar goal in Australia to help the community get better, more than 50% transparent litigations in Australia by 2030. So the challenge we are trying to solve is not just for our direct customers, but for the community that our customers serve. Whether it's law enforcement agencies or enterprise retail customers, at the end of the day, we are all trying to enable the community to have a reliable, trustworthy conversation, whether in person or in a court of law. And that helps us, galvanizes all of us about what we're doing. Our mission is bigger than just selling these products to policing agency. We're trying to help the community. And given that I'm part of the community, I might end up having a conversation with a police officer someday. I might end up in a court of law someday. That gives me a real sense of purpose that let's build a software that if I was on the wrong side of the law, would I trust this technology to tell my side of the story reliably, truthfully, 100%. So that's what we try and build into our products: tamper resistance, end-to-end encryption, the ability to not be able to go and edit anything, all of that.
Very noble goals indeed. And I think it helps kind of pivot nicely into your session that you've had at Sydney Sec today, because when I was preparing to meet you and chat to you, I was like, okay, so Gaurav was talking about biometric authentication, exploring opportunities and risks of biometric authentication in the modern world. Now, most people out there would know of, you use your face to unlock your phone or your thumbprint or whatever it may be. And it's gone from being this cool little thing that iPhones maybe did about 10, 15 years ago to pretty much a standard everywhere,
Yeah.
right? And I know that in a corporate sense, a lot of us are asking ourselves the question of can we reduce the reliance on passwords for our staff by using the biometric features in our devices? So hearing more about the work that you do has helped me bridge the gap between okay, one of my first questions for you is, why are you so interested in biometrics? And I think it's quite clear from hearing about the work, but tell us a little bit more about the session and your talk around biometrics and why you brought that to Sydney Sec.
Biometric was just an angle to talk about the vulnerabilities we have in the identity and access management architecture. So my talk, though the biometric is in the title, was less about biometric, was more about how do we build architecture where we have trust distributed, decentralized. So Lisa, one of the youngest treasurer in the history of banking industry, was at a funeral last year in Brisbane when her face apparently authorized a $12 million offshore transfer. She hadn't fallen victim to any phishing campaign. She hadn't lost her device. She hadn't touched her device in a long time. And yet, somehow, the authentication system at the bank authorized that transaction using her Face ID as the third factor of authentication. All because the bank had built trust around just the sensor, just the Face ID sensor. The trust was not distributed. And the moment, what happened was some of the threat actors managed to build, test, rebuild, retest a fake, deepfaked image that could move, tilt, nod using what is known as generative adversarial network. So GANs is an AI architecture, has two models, one that generates fake biometric profile, one that tests. And they compete until the generator gets so good, the judge can't tell any difference. And that's what happened in that case. So the attackers didn't need to steal Lisa's device. They got her image from public portals, press releases, LinkedIn profile, and they generated a deepfake that managed to trick their authentication systems.
And this was did you say resulted in a $12 million transfer?
Offshore transfer.
Okay. Was this for a corporation or an individual?
Was on behalf of a corporation from one of the Brisbane banks to a corporation.
That's incredible. And so, but what other? I'm interested in how a facial scan or a facial recognition was you said the third factor of authentication, right? Yeah. So, what did else did the threat actors in this case have to go through to get to that point?
Yeah, so the threat actors had been in the environment, advanced persistent attackers had been in the environment for over a year. At the end of the investigation, a lot came out. It wasn't just Lisa. 6 other peers, their Face IDs also were stolen. And their attackers had been in the system for over a year. They had managed to steal the credential. They had managed to steal the multi-factor authentication tokens. And the reason that third factor authentication token, the Face ID, also failed, we kind of assume that Face ID, especially in this day and age, is dynamic. You have to move your head, you have to nod and blink. But what we forget that the input is dynamic. What that system scanner is comparing against is still a static signature. What that sensor stores in its database is a static signature. So I, as an input, I'm stand in front of a biometric scanner. I may be moving. I may be a dynamic image. I may be a dynamic human. But the signature is still static. And that's where dynamic images can fool those static scanners.
That's incredible. And especially because, well, they were planning this for a year, but a year for a $12 million payday is...
That was just the
incentive
beginning.
enough. Yeah,
that
exactly.
was just the beginning. 3 weeks later, one of her colleagues, Sam, the names are not real.
Of course. So
in different face, Sam's face, Sam was the CFO, different face, different target, very similar mode of operation. They managed to break through a payroll system using Sam's fake Face ID and started moving smaller amounts of money to unremarkable accounts, which managed to fly through under the radar. But the money moved. Again, those were test cases. $12 million turned out were just a test. The avalanche was just starting. In the end, they lost many, many more $1 million.
Everyone talks about how scary the realism of deepfakes is getting. And you mentioned there, you expect that, that the face might move and all that kind of stuff. Because I've I've spoken to some people on this show before who talk about finding AI profiles on social media because usually in the past, AI generates a face that's like quite perfectly symmetrical.
Yeah.
Like, the pupils of the eyes are in the exact same place. And the human face is not perfectly symmetrical,
Exactly.
but it's getting to the point where it seems like it can replicate enough of those little fine details to be able to completely fool a third factor of authentication on at such a level.
Yeah, that's what generative adversarial network does. Those two models, the generator and the judge. The generator keeps building an image or your voice profile or your fingerprint profile frame by frame, and the judge tests it against a real image that I can find on your LinkedIn profile, on your press releases, in your conference photographs. It keeps comparing and that competition goes on. It's a competition like a hackathon. Until the generator creates an image or a fingerprint or a voice print that the judge can't differentiate from real. And that's when the system helps the attackers use that final product to test against the real system. If it fails, it keeps iterating. So there is iteration in that malicious innovation. Aadhaar is India's unified ID across the nation. And the challenge with India, the large population, is when centralized systems fall, it has massive impact. So in 2018, 1.1 billion Indian citizens' personal data, including biometric data, was stolen through subcontractors, unauthenticated open endpoints, and various other systems. And similarly, I mentioned in my presentation, in 2019, 100,000 global passengers, not just US citizens, global passengers' facial images were stolen from a subcontractor of US border protection. Those events are not new. The trends are not new. Brazil has been victim to that in 2021. 221 million Brazilian citizens lost their biometric ID, and those identities were for sale on dark web just for $300, $400.
So the Aadhaar thing for India is their sort of the user ID. So I guess, is that similar to like how we all have like a MyGov login?
It's worse because with MyGov,
okay.
you're not providing your iris, eye scan. You're not providing your fingerprints with MyGov. I don't think so. It's been a long time since I created my MyGov profile. But with Aadhaar, you literally have to go in person to a center and have your fingers scanned, have your retinas scanned. So that is a lot of data sitting in a centralized system. And that's one theme I wanted to spoke about during my presentation is it's less about biometric. It's not the biometric system failing. It's about the way we design these systems, the centralization of identity. Why do we have to create systems like Aadhaar or Brazil's system or US's system where millions and billions of people's identities, including biometric, is sitting in one database? That's a gold mine for any attacker to go and attack.
Exactly. Well, I mean, biometric data almost seems like the last piece of the puzzle because I feel people are a little desensitized to things like their date of birth and their driver's license numbers being stolen because you can replace that. But when your biometric data is stolen, like that's...
Yeah.
You can't really go and, I mean, I guess you could get a new face if you had enough money.
Not me.
Yeah, exactly. But that's if you're trying to talk to someone about like, well, all right, here's the level of how much you should give an SHIT based on what's been stolen. Okay, first name, last name, whoop-de-doo. Birth date, that can be used to identify. Driver's license, oh crap, right. Your biometrics, your fingerprints, your facial recognition data.
Yeah.
That's
You can't really rotate your face every quarter, can you?
Exactly, yeah. Like, what kind of advice would you even give someone at that stage?
My advice, or what I think would work, is not to have put onus on individuals. We live in a society where we can't cotton ball ourselves and go hide under a rock. We all have digital footprints, and we would continue to have. The world we are living in, the kids, our kids, the world they would live in, everybody would have a massive virtual footprint. So we can't put that onus on individuals to not have a virtual presence, not speak up. We are going to have our voices recorded, our videos recorded everywhere. I put onus on the architects, the system designers who build those systems, whether it's an identity verification system or any system, to think about distributing trust, distributing validation across all the layers of their system or whatever application that is, so that if we're not centralizing trust at one point in time or one point of that architecture. You don't want to have a system where if one domino falls, it knocks every domino down. Every domino should have its own validation that, hey, if you want to talk to me, you have to validate yourself. And that distribution of trust in any architecture would help reduce the impact of those problems. So the likelihood would still continue. I try to think of that in two-dimensional architecture, friction versus survivability. A lot of biometric systems these days work with low friction. They're seamless. You don't need password. Exactly. Like as you mentioned earlier, on our iPhones, it's so easy to just look at it and it unlocks. It's frictionless, seamless. But if it gets compromised, there's low survivability of what happens after that. So what I advocate for is for designers and architects to build systems that are relatively higher friction, but also have higher survivability after my Face ID is compromised. So I try and think beyond that. I assume that my Face ID, my voice is going to get compromised. Can I survive in that world where everything is compromised? If I can, who should build that? It's on the people who build those apps and hardware. The onus should be on them.
What's sort of the balance that you think that we're looking for here then? Because, as we say, biometric authentication is everywhere these days. It's wonderful and it's convenient. And also, you can't avoid a camera or a microphone. It's very easy to create a facsimile of someone's voice these days or their face or whatever. Yeah, what's the advice for the people designing these systems? You touched on a little bit there, but I guess also for individuals as well.
As you mentioned earlier, to individuals, I would say give a little bit of an SHIT. I speak to lawyers, and even sometimes some of those lawyers say that, everything about me is already out there. Why should I care? It's not just about a cyber security. It's about your safety. If you think about if something goes wrong with your identity and somebody manages to take a massive mortgage in your name, think about the impact it would have on your mental well-being, your kids, what kind of impact it might have on your family members, your friends, the loved ones. Think in real terms. That's what I try to tell individuals, that it's not about cybersecurity. It's not about online security. It's more about real world safety. These compromises, if your identity is compromised, what happens after that is the attackers to use your identity to take mortgages in your name. It's all about business. At the end of the day, attackers want to make money.
Of course.
And you would be on the hook to repay all of that back. And even if the banks eventually could be a long, long tail at the end of a massively expensive litigation, realize that you weren't the criminal, you still have to go through that very painful, avoidable journey. We can avoid doing that just by being extra careful. You mentioned date of birth earlier. I mean, do I really have to put in my real date of birth in every website that wants my date of birth? Maybe the airline, yes, but all the other profiles, I personally don't provide my real date of birth if I don't have to.
There's a big conversation, I think, that's happening with a lot of like developers and people designing customer-facing or internet-facing systems these days as well, where they're having to ask themselves, why do I need the customer or the user to register this information?
Their sales teams, their marketing teams.
Yeah, exactly right. But why? I fill out a lot of online forms, and a lot of them ask for my date of birth, and I'm just and like, this is not a system that really needs to know my age. Or if it wants to know my age, I'll just say I'm 41.
Exactly.
But why does it need my full date of birth, right? And then at the same time, like, people need to be asking themselves, do we even need to hold on to this information? If you are collecting biometric data for whatever reason, then do you need to be holding on to it? Do you need whatever it may be? Like, I think that sort of speaks to your point, right? There's a lot of individual responsibility, but there's so much on the people designing and architecting these systems who are probably just copying templates of like, well, that's just the standard information that you asked for.
Yeah, and I don't want to, and I also don't want to sound like it's us versus them, because
of course.
We are part of the solution. We are in the cybersecurity industry. I think myself as less of a security person, more of a business enabler, community enabler. So how do I convince my decision makers, my marketing teams, product teams, that, hey, we don't really need that information. Don't design products in a way where we are collecting unnecessary information or hoarding that information just in case a market opens up for that kind of information 10 years from now. We have to think about how is now decrypt later attacks. We have to think about nation state attackers. What if they get into our system? Yes, they can't decrypt it now. But what about when quantum becomes commercially feasible?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those attackers are stealing that information, sitting on it. It might become useful 10 years from now. So as in my role within my organization and through my public speaking, when I engage with the community, I try and educate. Don't think about just now. Think of what would happen when quantum, and it's not about when. You would know Western Australia has a quantum computer that runs on room temperature. That's a massive leap. So these technologies are available now. They are commercially infeasible, but they would become feasible very soon.
Yeah, exactly. And we've been talking about it for years and years, but these things are here.
Yeah.
They are actually here. Like it's not science fiction anymore. We've invented the universal translator.
Exactly.
It's all here. I want to flip this a little bit in terms of people who are thinking of using biometrics in day-to-day life, right? Like, so even in organizations I work in, we're having conversations around like, should we enable biometrics on our Surface devices and our Windows or our HP devices or whatever they may be, and reduce the reliance on passwords? Like, is that a different kind of conversation and risk to what you're talking about, or is there still something in what you're talking about here that people need to think about when implementing these measures?
I think what you're suggesting is part of the solution. If we design the solution in a way, for example, your iPhone unlocks using your Face ID, and then it allows you to interact with various applications depending upon your setting. The way Apple implements it is called Apple Enclave. Your Face ID sits on the device. It's not shared with any third-party app. It's easy to test. Turn your phone on airplane mode and it would still unlock.
Yes, of course.
What it proves that your Face ID is not being sent to a cloud platform. It's not traveling over the internet to be validated. If we can build something similar in whether any computing device that is, as long as we are protecting that biometric information within the hardware in an isolated operating environment. So if the rest of the environment gets compromised or infected, biometric ID still remains isolated.
Well, that has all been absolutely fascinating, and I could probably continue to talk to you for another hour, and this is really, really interesting stuff. I guess any final advice for security professionals out there who are grappling with this that you'd like to impart?
I would say that think about resilience, not about whether it's biometrics or architecture. If we try and zoom out a little bit and think from resilience perspective, whether it's individual resilience, community resilience, or national resilience at Australia perspective, resilience is not a posture. It's not a matrix that we present to our board members or our community members. Resilience is preparing for a day when nothing works, everything is compromised, and we can still keep our community safe. So if we can zoom out and think from community perspective, that would inform us how we build our products.
It's a society BCP almost, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a really, really interesting thought to take us out on. Thank you so much for bringing such a fascinating topic to Sydney Sec and to Cyber Voices. And I guess thank you so much for sharing your voice with us today.
Thank you for having me, David. I absolutely enjoyed having this conversation.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cyber Voices. Our music is by Sanar Garut, our show artwork is by Studio Quarantine, and we record our show at This Is a Studio in Pran, Melbourne, part of Popplant Productions. Please make sure you follow the show on your podcast platform of choice and leave us a 5-star review. This will help others find the show. Also, please follow the association on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you want to add your voice to our ever-growing chorus of diverse cyber voices, have questions, feedback, or would like to be a sponsor, you can do so by emailing us at cybervoices@aisa.org.au. That's cybervoices@aisa.org.au. Are you an ASA member? If not, you should consider joining our network of over 12,000 members across Australia. An ASA membership can open doors, build professional networks, create lifetime friendships, and offer exclusive training, events, and other perks. Become a member today by heading to our website at asa.org.au. That is all for today. I hope you will join us again next time on Cyber Voices.